raw plough plate and going for it. Now there's even 3D printing in the mix for scratch building, and I think for myself the jury's still out on 3D printing, whether or not that is kind of cheating or whether or not it has a place in the hobby, but I guess it's here to stay, so maybe it does. But I guess for traditional scratch building, what I call scratch building is where you're either taking a base kit and you're taking elements from other kits and you're kind of mashing it together, so you're sort of using those parts from other kits to make something original, or where you're taking, say, a base kit and you're manufacturing the parts from absolute scratch, so from just like raw plough plate or from you know, all of the different styrene type things that you can buy, and actually making original parts. And you can go one step further and start like sculpting parts and moulding and all that sort of stuff, but it's quite a broad thing when people say scratch building. But the tools that I use like every day, and if you are keen to get into scratch building, these are the sorts of tools that you'll use constantly, is, you know, things like obviously a hobby knife, good ruler, scribers, compass and divider, you know, pin vise, a good saw, a razor saw is pretty invaluable. You kind of use that all the time when you're cutting parts to get, you know, nice flush cuts and sort of straight and square cuts. Files are like the main tool. It's the main thing I use really is a file. Clamps, and then you know, all the usual kind of modelling gear. But I guess with scratch building you kind of approach things differently, where, you know, you do everything in layers. You build up. You kind of just don't like go, okay, I want to make this really complex part and I'm going to start from the outside in. You kind of work from like the most basic geometric sort of shapes, and then you build out on top of that. And it's really amazing how a very simple sort of geometric shape, and if we get time at the end I'll kind of talk through a bit of it on Captain Chunky here. It's amazing how you can start with a very basic sort of shape that's quite easy to make, and then just by adding in a little bit of detail and adding that sort of stuff and layers on top of it, you can end up coming up with quite a detailed part at the end. As far as tooling goes, if you're really serious about it and you really start doing it and you want to kind of start manufacturing or making your own type of models from absolute scratch with no base kit, then there are some more serious tools, but obviously they come at a serious price. But if money's not an issue for you, or you really want to get to that level, then these tools do make your life a hell of a lot easier. You know, a good set of calipers, you know, a putter or a chopper, which is next to that. Those sorts of things, if you're doing repetitive cuts, like if you're making a whole lot of vents or something like that, and you just need to cut something exactly the same angles and the same length, having a chopper like that, you can just set it up, get your angle right, and then it's really simple. You can just bang them out, and you know that they're all the same. And it's much easier than trying to get a, you know, like a ruler and measure each one and cut them, and they'll always be slightly different. So things like that are really handy. Sanders, a rotary tool. I mean, if you're scratch building, a rotary tool is almost a must, because it makes your life easy when you're trying to do, you know, if you're cutting the whole bottom of a leg off or something like that, you can saw it off and things like that, but a rotary tool helps you sort of like clean the internals out, so you can maybe build some other structure inside it to support a new foot or whatever it might be, which is kind of what I did here in Captain. Like, most of the bottom of the leg was cut off, and I sort of like had to create a big space inside the leg, so to do that with a knife and to sort of break it with, so that it's quite difficult. But with a rotary tool, you just put one bit on the end and you can just clean it out, and it's perfect, you know. So things like that are really good. Sanders will, like the sander that's actually there, that'll eat plastic, so it's not for your sort of plastic, but it's more if you get into sculpting with putties, like epoxy sculpts and things like that, which I'll sort of show a bit later on. Sanders are really great for that because they get you good true profiles. You can get set angles and things like that, and get the sort of the hard work of getting the big blocky parts done and know that they're actually at the right angles. They're all the same, especially if you're making multiple things. And then the most expensive tool there is the ultrasonic cutter up in the top right. I've only just recently purchased one, so I'm not really up to speed on what it can be used for, but I've used it quite a bit. I've used Brian from Hobbyco's one quite a bit, and again, it's a very expensive tool, but if you are using it a lot and you're doing a lot of scratch building, it's worth its weight in gold, because it can allow you to do things that no other tool can. So for instance, if you want to put a hole in the panel, you remember back to Josh's panel at the beginning of the day, he drilled out the hole with a whole set of pilot holes, and then you sort of chop them out and clean it all up and everything. With the ultrasonic cutter, you can actually plunge cut with it. So like if you want to put a hole in the center of a panel, you don't have to worry about drilling a whole bunch of holes. You can just get the cutter and just push it straight into the plastic, and it's literally like a hot knife through butter. You can just like rough out that shape and then just clean it up with a file, and it saves you hours of drilling and drilling. And when I did the captain here, like I had a lot of things that were recessed into panels, and they were all done just with drilling out a huge big number of pilot holes and cleaning it all up. And when you have to do that times 4 for the different limbs, it sort of adds up. But having something like that, it's really good. But it is a massively expensive tool, probably the dearest you'll ever buy. But if you can afford it, hey, why not? Okay, so moving on to materials. I mean, I've sort of talked about most of them. Styrene's the most common, but to be honest, there's no rules. I mean, I use whatever. I use whatever I find. I walk past council pickup day and I see things and I think, that might be good as something, or I kind of can see something in coming out. So you rip open an old like DVD machine or something like that, and there's all sorts of things that you can use. Lego's awesome. Lego, I use a lot of Lego, so my daughters have a lot of Lego kits where they're missing certain key pieces, because I sort of spot it and think, right, that's perfect, I'll take that and I'll use it on that. And I've got a lot of Lego on the captain, so you know, there's nothing wrong with using Lego. Yeah, so just looking at one of the captain's feet there, you can see I've got things like an old arm joint from an HG kit, piece of handmade stuff, scratch built from styrene, apart from an F22 kit. These nails in the hydraulics, Lego on the side, torso from a kit, a thruster from an old transformer, and I mean just kind of anything I see. If I kind of, scratch building forces you to become a hoarder, well, my modelling forces you to become a hoarder, but I sort of, everything I kind of see, I usually like break little bits off things that I might see that's just junk and chuck it away. And I've got massive buckets of all sorts of different things, and I just rifle through them and try and get ideas from all that sort of stuff. But you know, if you can do a reasonable paint job, it's amazing what you can turn something that's really simple into something looking like it was meant to be there and meant to be a part, you know. So, getting back to what I said before, like about breaking things into stages, that's the most important thing about scratch building, is that sometimes it can be daunting because people they know what they want in their head, but when they try and envision it on the piece, it's like, well, how am I going to do all that? But I break everything down into the most basic geometric shape. So I just look at something, I kind of get an idea of where I want to go with it, and I think, all right, well, it's basically that sort of trapezoid shape, and I just go from there. Because the good thing about it is that, like, everything you make, you can destroy again. So you can cut into down things you make, you can add more onto them, you can add detail to them, just like you would with any model part that you want to detail. So today what I thought I'd do is actually make, hopefully in the time I've got, this front skirt. So I'll pass it around in a moment, but if you look at it for what it is, and I've got one just in primer here which I'll pass around, there's actually not a lot to it from actual shape, but once you start adding in like chamfered edges, putting on a front panel, adding some screw detail, putting in some scribing, some sort of little vent detail, things like that, and I've tried to keep it fairly plain, it really starts to come to life. And then once you put a paint job on top of that, again, it's sort of next level. So I always think of things in layers, and the last layer I think about is paint. So when I'm scratch building, most people just think about it as the actual building, and that's true, but any one of us that have ever built any model knows that paint transforms a model. So paint is the most valuable step in scratch building, because it can be your best friend or your worst enemy. You know, you can hide a lot with painting, but you can also show a lot with painting. So whenever I'm scratch building something, I think about it finished. I don't think about the shape and just the parts. in just one color plastic. I actually think about, well, what part of it do I want to actually show up? Do I want a panel on the front? Do I want all that sort of stuff? And that's a really important thing when you're scratch building. A lot of people just focus on the plastic, on the part, and then once they build it, do a fantastic job of it, and then they paint it and they lose all of that sort of effort that they put into it. They don't accentuate the chamfers, they don't sort of showcase the things that they've built into it, and it's all kind of for nothing. So can we switch over to the camera now, Scott? So that's it for the slides. I promised they'd be short. So just before we rip into it, I thought I'd show some really basic things for people that have never worked with styrene before, because styrene becomes your like bread and butter when you're scratch building. You use it for everything. The number one rule with using styrene is never throw any styrene away. So basically every tiny little bit that you cut off something or whatever, keep it. And I've got a box there you can see down there, it's full of rubbish, all right? But I guarantee you over the course of any sort of scratch building I do, those little tiny triangles and those little pieces there, they're so useful, because you use them as packers, use them as anything, use them as a guide so that you get a good angle for something. If you throw all that stuff away, all you end up doing is getting a brand new shiny piece of styrene, cutting off that piece anyway. So it like triples the amount of styrene that you go through when you do that. So just on cutting, there's a million ways to cut it. You can either just get a hobby knife and cut straight through it. Depending on how thick styrene is, you can do that. So some of the thinner styrenes, it's quite easy just to cut through in one pass or two passes. But once you get up around 1 mil, which is what this part is here, I find that the best way is to scribe and snap method. So if no one's ever seen that before, I'll just try and, So say we wanted that part on the end there, you can basically hack at it and just keep cutting, and you'll get that through it eventually. But what will end up happening is that the actual edge that you cut will be on an angle, because your hand naturally puts pressure in one direction, and it'll never be square, and it won't sort of be nice, and you'll end up sort of bulging up the edge of the styrene. And if you're then putting it together, when you put your panels together and paint on it, you'll see this little bulge on all the edges of things. It's because you've sort of stressed the styrene. So I actually don't press very hard, I just do quite a light sort of cut through there. It doesn't need a lot of force, and I mean that cut there is it's barely cut into it. But the great thing about styrene is now it will snap perfectly on that, right? So you can just snap it, and you're not going to be able to see it on there, but you end up with a really good square sort of cut there, right? So you'd never get that normally. So yeah, the snapping is pretty much the standard. So yeah, I will. Yeah. Someone might, and I'll pass these around too, so everyone can sort of see what we're doing. Okay, so the next and probably second most important thing when you're scratch building is that sometimes you're building one piece. It might be like a central piece or something like that, and you only need one, so it's kind of not worth going through all the overhead of creating templates and all that sort of stuff. But generally, when you build something, there's a mirror image of it, or there's like a right side or a left side. So the most important thing is to actually make templates, right? So I use templates, basically I use styrene, like really thin styrene to make templates, and you can kind of see here it's like a playing card almost, right? It's very thin. But if you use paper or card even, you don't get razor sharp edges, and like the width of your pencil when you trace around it, you end up from one part to the next, they're not consistent in size. Whereas if you use something like styrene that gives razor sharp sort of edges, all your parts will generally be the same size, right? So because I'm making a skirt that's got a front and a back, I obviously need two parts. So what I do is I basically use the template to trace them both out, and then I cut out these parts, and they're just done the same way I did that snap there. I just snap them all out and get it. Now, you could go straight into it and start building it from there, but what will end up happening is that it's pretty much impossible to trace and off the hand, off a cut, get two identical pieces. So what I always do is basically, once I've cut them out, I get some double-sided tape and I stick the two of them together as close as I can so that they match, and then I actually finish the edge with my file. So I file them as a pair, and if I was making two skirts, I would have 4 of these, but I would pair up the left side and pair up the right side, so you wouldn't do all 4 together, because then it gets too thick and you'll get an angle on it, and the front ones will be smaller than the back ones. So basically, the pairs that you're going to have, I put them together with double-sided tape, and then I file them, and I get them identical, so they're exactly the same, right? And that's why I mark them both 1 and 1, because this is the way they need to go together, so that they match like a mirror. If I put them this way, they may not be exactly right, but because I filed them together like this, I know that they'll be right for that. So that's how I kind of use my guide to make that sort of stuff. So when I actually make a part, what I think about is the thickness of the part, and this is just for the purpose of today's demo. This skirt's probably a bit thick, but it sort of helps in doing this. So basically what I'll do is I'll either buy the styrene in these strips, which you can buy, or I just get a sheet and just use a guide and cut out a whole bunch of them, and then you know you're getting a consistent width. But I guess one pointer is never ever cut. If you're putting thickness on something, never make that cut the final thickness, because you can glue it all together perfectly, but it'll take you 3 times as long, and there's really no need to do that. So always have a bit of overhang, like 2 or 3 mil, and then that way it just makes it easier when you're sort of banging it all together to get it pretty close, and then you just clean it up with the rest, with all your tools. So what I would do normally with this is basically I tend to use cement the most. So I like this because it's thick. If you use like the green one, like the actual like thin cement, it's no good for this type of work, because it'll just evaporate the minute you put it on the surface. It's meant for where there's already a joint and it'll wick in between them, whereas this is like good old glue, you can pretty much, it's indestructible, you can use it for whatever. So generally, clean some of this up. So generally what I'll do is I'll think about, right, well, this is simply just sacrificial, it's just there to add as a packer between the two, but I might want to strategically position this because I might intend to drill into the panel to put a peg or something in there. So if I'm doing that, what I'll do is I'll generally put this somewhere on the piece where I know later on I'm going to be putting a peg, and if they're floating around somewhere you can see the peg that's in the back of them. I'll try and put this here so that later on when I drill into it, I'm drilling into like good meaty styrene. But it doesn't really matter for something like a little skirt which is really light. But on the Captain there's parts that are really heavy, so I had to be quite strategic in how I did that, and actually some of that stuff I've packed it full of epoxy because the weight sort of hanging on it, I needed it in there. But generally what I always do is I use this glue initially and I just put a blob wherever. The reason I use it is because it's not like super glue where the minute you put it down, that's it, right? You don't get another go at it. And in particular when you're trying to position this stuff the first time, having a bit of give in it is good. And then you can always follow up with super glue after that, right? So what I generally do is just put a bit on there and put them together roughly. You get plenty of time to move it around. And I guess everyone's kind of got their own techniques for getting this even across the part, because obviously if I can exaggerate it, if they were like that, being exaggerated, you're going to come to put your top on there and it won't be, it'll look terrible, right? So to get them actually even, and now that's already biting in, hang on. Right, so to get them even, basically I set them up. I use something like, these mats are good because they've got a grid on it for you, so you know that something's square. So basically I would just align it on one of those and use something straight at an edge And if both of those edges are touching that, then it has to be aligned, right? And if it's flat on there, and then you can kind of just eyeball it and check it. So usually I check it and make sure that it's square, and that actually the edges are together. And it saves you a lot of hassle when you come to actually putting your stuff on the outside. So once I'm happy with that, generally I would leave it and go, but for today I'll speed things up a wee bit with just some CA. So let's put a bit in there, just to sort of send it home. Thanks, mate. And if you've never used Kicker before, again, it's worth its weight in gold. So, sorry, I'm sort of cutting you guys off there. So what Kicker does is basically, if you're using CA glue dries pretty quick on its own, but Kicker just gives you an instant kick. So the second you touch the Kicker on the CA glue, that's it. It's just rock hard. And the only way you can get it apart is to break it apart again there. But now if we look at that, we can see that it's all square, it's all even. If you look at it on the end, you can see that it's all even. So taking a little bit of time at that stage will save you a huge amount of time at the end, right? So now basically the process is pretty simple, although it can be made difficult if you sort of don't approach it the right way. So what I try and do is I think about, you know, one, are there any edges on this when it's on the part that are going to be more important than others? So like if this top edge here, for instance, is going to be seen, and it's going to be like right in your face, I'll try and take extra care there. But if, you know, sort of at the back here underneath it is never going to be seen, then I'll kind of just, you know, slap it on and clean it up a wee bit there. So again, it's common sense, right? It's like work around it in a way. But basically what I do is I just go around the piece now and just fill it in, and it doesn't have to be pretty. I mean, everything you do you're going to have to clean up, but I use a bit of this glue just to help it bite, and it's just so that it basically holds it in place for you. So I come along here and sort of, if you can see there, see it's just basically overhanging, just a tiny bit at the end there. I'll sort of, that's fine, I can clean it up with the file. So I get it there right, and I just basically push it down so that at least I know the back of it, for instance, is flush, right? But because I want to make this skirt this way, I'll do it the other way so that the offcut's at the back, right? So I'll push it down there, get it pretty good, and if you can see now in the front, that's actually pretty good, right? That's not going to need a lot of cleanup there. So once I get that one in place, then I'll just come and send it home with some CA. And again, this is kind of an optional step. You don't have to use CA. Like if you're prepared to wait, you can just use the cement and come back the next day and do a bit more. But I find that once I'm sort of scratch building, like I kind of get on a bit of a roll, and then I just hate sort of waiting all the time. So if you're using a bit of Kicker and a bit of CA glue, you can really speed things up and sort of get going on it. And once you put that Kicker on there, like that will actually be completely dry. So you'd have to snap that piece off now to get it off. So that's the sort of process I follow now. And basically I'll just get my cutters and I lay the offside jaw basically flush with the other piece there. If it's not perfect, it's okay. You can generally fill it with a bit of CA glue or something like that and get it right. And I just nick the end off. And what you'll find is you get a bit, it's a bit proud on the end there. So on this end here, it'll just be a little bit proud, which is good. That's what you want. Because if you cut it too low, then you're going to have to fill a gap, right? So this is where I grab my file. And some tricks about filing is that for a part like this, you have a you sort of you want to file it like that so that you get it nice there, but actually what you'll end up doing is digging into the part about here. So with that sort of stuff, I always file off, and again, it doesn't have to be perfect at this stage, right? So I basically file off until it's flush across that part, right? And now what you can see is that we've now got a completely flush edge along there, but there will be a little bit of a burr at the end there, and that burr, if you now glue on top of it, it'll throw that end up a bit, and you'll end up with sort of chasing that burr the whole way around it, and your ends will sort of swell. So in between every step, I sort of knock that burr off, give it a bit of a sand there, and then it's ready for the next part, right? So again, you just repeat the process. I'll try to go through this as quick as I can. And by working your way around the part, as opposed to doing this side, doing that side, you never have to do a cut where you've got to get a part to fit in between a specific gap, right? Because if you just work your way around it, you're only ever cutting off one side. So you're just chasing that one side around there. But if you did two sides together, then you're going to end up having to measure a part to get it perfectly to sit in there, and that's a nightmare, right? So again, I just flush off the front so that my waste is at the back. But again, it's not that big a deal. You can clean most of this up. I'll just get it going with some glue here. And because I'm using the CA on the inside, it doesn't have to be pretty. In fact, the more you put in there, the better, because it's just going to give you added strength, especially once we start filing it and sort of attacking it with the hobby knife and whatnot. And the good thing about Kicker is that when the reaction takes hold, it actually turns kind of yellow, so you sort of know that it's done it. But just be mindful that it immediately sets up the chemical reaction. So if you get like CA glue on your fingers and things like that, just drying, it's no big deal, it can just dry naturally. But if you get Kicker on it, it'll dry instantly and it actually burns you. And it really does burn too. And if you get a big blob on there, you get a massive blister and everything like that, because it instantly gets hot. Right, so I whack that piece off again, file the end off flush, hit it with my sandpaper, and go again. Yep. Sure, that's a good question. So, a lot of people call this glue, right? Actually, it's not glue. If you tried to glue anything except styrene and some other plastics with it, it'd do nothing. Because it's not actually a glue, it's a cement, and basically what it does is it's a solvent. I could glue styrene just using acetone, because all this does is it melts the styrene, so it just melts the two sides ever so slightly, and they weld together. And then because it's solvent based, the solvent evaporates, and then the two are like become one part. They literally weld together. This is different. This is CA glue, so this is actually like super glue, and when you put this on, it sort of chemically bonds the two surfaces together like any normal glue. And that's why you could use this on anything. I could glue anything with that, including fingers. Right? But with this stuff here, if I put this on my fingers, it's a bit sticky, but it'll never ever glue my fingers together, right? So that's the sort of difference between them. Everyone just calls it glue because it glues styrene and it glues models, but try gluing something else with it and it won't do anything. Right? The only reason I use the CA glue particularly now is because the CA glue, I can make it basically dry instant by using the Kicker. It'll just instantly dry. Right, so I'll just zoom through the rest of this. Right, I think another really important thing about scratch building is build the part in your head first. So what I mean by that is think about how's the finished part going to look, how's it going to hang together, what am I using it for, because I've seen people spend so much time on things where if you just do it kind of roughly and then clean it up with a file, it's 10 times faster, you actually get a better finish. Trying to measure this stuff and get it exactly right and things like that, you'll just spend so long doing it, it'll never be exactly right, and you'll end up having to clean it up anyway. So it's like thinking about being, I guess, efficient with the way you do it. It's like, that's cool, I can just clean that up, or if there's a bit of a gap there, I'll just fill it with some CA glue and just file it, it'll be fine, right? And the reason I say that is because most of us have jobs and life and all that sort of stuff, so when you actually get to time to do your hobby, like I want to sort of maximise the time I can get at it, and if it takes me 2 days to make one skirt because I measured everything with a set of calipers and it's perfect, and when I get it together it's not actually perfect, and then I have to fill it, and it's just like I'd much rather have done 2 of these in one night and done all the detail and had sort of more fun with it. But you know, as we all are well aware, the main thing with scratch building, as with the entire hobby, is practice. So if you want to do scratch building, start small. Just think about maybe one element on a kit that you could scratch build, or do a diorama where you can scratch build some stuff in the diorama. I mean, that's really good practice because no one's got a point of reference for a diorama, and generally people that you show your model to are way more forgiving on your kind of dioramas. If you're scratch building stuff there, it doesn't sort of have to be as perfect as, say, a kit would be and things like that. But yeah, if you're wanting to sort of get into it, my advice is don't dive straight into sort of like the entire kit, every part on it is scratch built, because all you'll end up doing is not doing a job you're probably satisfied with. It'll take you forever, and there's no sort of payoff at the end, right? You'll finish it and go, well, it looks like crap, I don't really like it, you know? And you'll go, I hate scratch building, and you never go back to it. But if you just start small and do stuff that's manageable, you can kind of learn, and you know, these little skirts and make yourself little panels, or I don't know, make weapons and things like that. They're great to learn with, right? Because one, if you make this one skirt and you don't like it, you just chuck it in the bin and make a second version. I guarantee you your second version will be 10 times better than your first, right? And you know, the old saying in the book, we learn more from our mistakes. That's totally true, right? So making mistakes is good. It means you know what to not do next time. So on this last one, right, this is kind of what I was saying. If I had have not gone around this part, I would have ended up basically having to fit a piece in. But because now these two have gone all the way around like that, now I'm ended here. Now, because of the way that I've been doing it, I don't have to try and measure a piece to get in there. Basically, I can just file both edges off flush. And you see, you can be quite rough on it, and that CA glue is holding it. I mean, like, the whole pressure of the file is trying to push this panel off, and it's not budging. So the CA glue is very strong. So with this one, you just might need to check to see when you're flush. Yep. So if we look to there now, we can see that top edge is now flush the whole way. So it just makes for a really simple last part, right? Drop that in again. Doesn't have to look amazing. Now the issue is that we're not going to get any CA glue in here, so you're going to have to cheat a wee bit and put some glue, put heaps, it doesn't matter, it's going to ooze out, but that's okay. So I'll just give that a second to set up. Okay. Okay, so now you can just sort of go around, get the worst of it off. Okay, and we'll tidy that all up now as one kit. So that's kind of the bulk of it made, and you can see that all my excess is on one side. So that's another good thing. Like if you sort of have some excess on this side and some on this side, it just becomes a real pain to have to try and clean it up. Whereas this way, I know that this space is pretty good, so I can just worry about the back. And because it's the back, right? It doesn't have to be great. The most valuable thing that you can ever buy if you want to do this is one of these. So I'll pass it around at the end. It's a file plate. They're inexpensive. They're like $18 or something like that. Hobbyco has all different grades and sizes and whatnot. And these just save you so much time, right? So basically, as you would expect, it's a file plate, right? So it's dead flat for a start, and basically you can use it as a really wide file. So if you try to do this just with a file, your only option is either go across the part, and if you did that, you're going to end up with gouges going across the part that way, or try and do the edge and bring the edge down. If you do that, you'll end up with gouges down here, right? Or you can, if you're tricky, you can kind of go off and just try and meet it up there, but you'll never get it square. Whereas with this plate, you know for a fact it's flat, so you don't even have to care about it. You can just go for it, right? And I just turn it as I'm doing it. Don't just sort of go in one direction like that. I sort of rotate the part as I go, and you'll end up getting the front basically perfectly flush. Okay. I'll just sort of speed it up a bit here. So again, this is the front, so this is the part you need to pay attention to. I try to kind of always be neat with even the backs of things, because the amount of parts I've made and whatnot, and I thought, it's all right, it's just the back. And then later on you do your model, and the pose you have, it's like on an angle and you can see the back of it, and you just go, and then you've got to like repair it and you do all that sort of stuff. Generally I add detail to it to make it look like it was deliberate and it was meant to do that, you know, pure model. But where you know for a fact that you're only ever going to see the front, just a bit maybe to concentrate on, the rest of it, not so much, right? So just finish it up one last time there. Hit with the old sanding sponge. Sanding sponge is great for this sort of stuff because it's pretty robust and it sort of conforms to complex sort of shapes a lot easier, and it's just easier to get it. Right, so that's flush now. So the back, there's quite a lip there that you can see. So I could file that down, but it'll take a long time. But there's really no need. I just get the cutters and cut it as flush as I can. Right. So if you can see that, it's a bit ragged. So you see it's stepping. It's not perfect, but again, it doesn't matter because those little high spots will just come off with one pass of the file. There's stuff going everywhere. But if this had been the front of the kit, then it would have been, you've got to be sort of careful, and if you go a little bit too crazy and cut into it, you could have sort of put some damage in there or something in there, made it not so square, and then you're just going to have to fill it and come back to it. So it's kind of just about being smart about what you do. So there we are, I've whipped around it, and that was a lot easier than doing it off the file. So again, just treat it the same way you just did the front. I just knocked the high spots off. Right there, all the way around. A little bit clean up. So there's Scott. How are we going for time, Scott? 10 minutes? Oh, right. Okay. Right, so it's pretty good there. It's not perfect, but you get the idea. Right, so this is where having the template really helps. So the order of operation is really important. So like if you're wanting to put a panel line or scribe something on it just to add a bit of detail, you know, if you build the whole part and then add it in, it can be done. I mean, we do it to normal parts, right? But it's thinking about, well, while I've got it at this stage and I'm going to cover half of the panel line, I might as well just whack that panel line in now because it's quite simple. Just in the interest of time, I won't put the panel line in, but I'll show you how I mark it just so I can get to the sort of the end, right? So basically, I get the piece, and on my template you can see that I've got those lines extending the full width. What I actually only want is just this part, right? There's the panel line, and if you guys remember the part I cast around, you'll see it, and it goes down the edge as well. So basically I just lay it on there, and because I'm using a template, I know that it will be the same on both parts. So if you mirror imaging it, and then I basically, yeah, I sort of mark the top extension, mark the lower one, I mark this here, over there, sorry if you can't see it, and then I come in and basically just rule those lines in. And again, it doesn't have to be perfect because the actual tape's going to do the scribing for you. Alright, and then there'd be the one going across there as well. So basically, you can kind of see there, because I've done that, I know where my line is. So I would scribe that, and the part that's down here doesn't really matter because I'm going to cover that with a little panel there. So you can just sort of get your scribing nice up here and just scribe into there, and you don't worry about the sort of damage you're doing down there and across there, and get the line in. And then basically off another template that I've got, which is here, I've got another template, and this template has the holes in the corner too for where I put the screws in. And so pretty much I just come along here, and on my template I had a guideline on there. Just so I know where to actually put the top of that. So again, I just use a little bit of this, put a blow in. Drop it in and sort of orient it where I need it. Now normally I wouldn't use CA on something like this because on a flush fit like that, no matter how little amount of CA you put under there, this glue here, when you squish it, it'll lose out the sides and it'll basically go hard straight away. So it'll destroy that nice crisp sort of edge around the outside that you end up with. But that should hold it sufficiently for this. So then I get my template, which is here. I come back, I sort of align it where I need it. And then I get where did I put it? Yeah. So I just get a little sort of pin there, and basically just mark out my holes. But because I'm working with a template, I don't really have to think about it, right? And more importantly, if you're making two of these skirts, you don't have to worry about getting them exactly measuring and all that sort of stuff. And so pretty much, then I end up, not that you're going to be able to see it, but I end up with my holes in the right place. And then I use a drill, and I'm putting screws in this, so I just drill all those holes out. And then basically I bought this set, and most of us have this, but it's just like glasses, screws, and they're really, really tiny little screws, and They're good for adding detail and stuff like that in there. And so basically I just drill them out, drop a little super glue in there and just put the screw in there. And then that ends up becoming the panel. So I'll pass this one around again so you can see kind of all three versions. Just don't want to put that. Thank you. Okay, so for the last little bit, I just thought I'd talk about the captain and okay. So thanks. Okay, so on the captain, if we look maybe at the back here, you can sort of see like let me zoom in a little bit. Yep, that'll do. So like this whole kind of skirt area at the back here was scratch built, and if you actually look at it though, it's just a very basic geometric shape initially, and then I just stuck a panel on top, added this ribbing in to sort of match the base kit. There's my sort of screws added in the corners, the same as I have done on that panel. But it's sort of about building the layers up, right? And when you first do this and I built this structure there, for those of you guys that were watching my whips, it's like I did it and I thought, oh, it looks ridiculous, you know, but you sort of got to trust yourself and just keep going, and it's amazing what it is. And like I use anything, like see these small parts under here, these kind of like sort of open sort of rib parts, they're actually those floss things, you know, that you floss your teeth with, those little ones there. So I just sort of saw the detail and I thought, yeah, that's cool. So I just cut the flossy end off and glued it in there and I thought, yeah, that'll look awesome, right? And so I just do all that sort of stuff, and gradually, bit by bit, if you just approach it as one part at a time, like do the foot, do the leg, do the skirt, do the front, you'll be amazed, like you don't lose your mojo then. If you look at it as a whole kit, you'll just end up going, oh, this is out of control, I'm never going to get here. But if you just concentrate on one part at a time, when you bring it all together, you stand back and think, man, I modified the entire thing, right? So I always try and approach it like that, and what I actually do is the part that I'm working on is the only part that I have on my desk. The rest of it I just leave in the box or wherever, or drying. Usually I try and have something wet and something while I'm working on, but I don't have like the leg, the torso, the head, everything around me, because it's just like, it's too much, and I sort of think, oh, I've got so far to go on this, you know. But if I'm just working on the foot, I put way more energy into just the foot, and then when the foot's done, I put it away and work on the leg, and I put all that energy into the leg. And then at the end, when you paint it, you look back and think, yeah, okay, good, it's all come together now, right? So lastly, these skirts here were made exactly the same way that I have made those ones there, and using the exact same techniques. They've got chamfered edges, which the ones that I did today, unfortunately I didn't get a chance to do that, but I just do them with the file, adding kind of detail like all this ribbing here. I just cut a little section in and glued a bit of pipe in there, which I picked out later with paint. Yeah, and that's kind of how it all comes together in the end. So in the couple of minutes we might have left, is there any questions?
Sorry, can you talk about the epoxy putty?
Yeah, sure. So anyone that's used epoxy putty will know there's some of the main brands like the Tamiya one, and there's some others, and Milliput and things like that. Quite expensive for what you actually get, and they're awesome. I mean, they're purpose built for modelling, right? But on this, for instance, like all the legs are full of putty. The whole inside of that's full of putty. A lot of putty in here. And that would have been $200 worth of, you know, the Tamiya putty and Milliput and stuff like that. So I use this stuff which you can get from Barnes. It's called epoxy sculpt, and a lot of sort of sculptors use it. But it's two-part mix, and when it actually goes off, it is rock hard. You can drill it, file it, scribe it. I mean, it performs as well as any of those other things, but you just get a lot more of it. Like this kit's $55 compared to a $30 tube of the, you know, the Tamiya one, and it lasts a long time. And if you really want to commit, for $100 you can get these massive containers which will last you years, right? But it sort of does have a shelf life, so I tend to get just this size mainly. And that putty there is actually what I use to make. Let me zoom in. All these parts here. So if you look maybe up here. These sections here, which I've got in the sort of warning stripes, I just basically get some of that putty, flatten it out, stick it on there. You don't have to hurry because you get 3 hours of work time with it at least. And then basically when I get the thickness right, I just come back with my knife and just cut out that the nice rectangle, let it go off, drill out, put in little, you know, detail in the corners and whatnot to sort of add in rivet details, whatever it might be. And it's a really easy way of conforming something to a part, because you could do that with pla plate, but you have to sort of like bend it first because it won't stay there while you're trying to glue it. Whereas the putty, you don't have to rush, you just can just put it on there. When you're happy with the thickness, cut off and trim the excess off. Sands beautifully. So yeah, I highly recommend, if you're into using putties, give it a go. It's really good stuff.
Any more questions? Yeah, over here. So where do you buy the file plate?
The what, sorry?
The file plate.
Just from Hobbyco. Actually, it's I can't remember the brand. It's Mishima, is it? Yeah. It's a 2-pack. There's a really fine one, which is you can finish off it like it's. I've used that and then painted straight over it because it gives such a perfect finish. This is a bit sort of rougher, and it's good for just, you know, the initial building and just filing down. But yeah, that single thing there is honestly a must-have if you're scratch building. It saves you so much time.
Any more questions? Or?
Thanks, guys.
No worries. So everyone, thank Aaron. Hope you learn a lot of scratch building stuff. I want to see a lot of that next year in your entries, okay? Because yeah, that's just top stuff. So coming up shortly, in about another 5-10 minutes, Mr. Kawaguchi will be back to do his second session of the day. And after that, we'll have a session with Mr. Lincoln Wright, and then finishing up with our Q&A session. So in about 5-10 minutes, Mr. Kawaguchi will be back on stage. So thank you.